Hello indie game fans, 2024 has been a killer year so far for indie games, and can you believe it? It only looks to get even better, with the top 25 games for the rest of the year beginning with Meifumado, a game that is back from the dead, being kickstarted in 2022, and then the developer went radio silent. Long story short, it has to do with their country being sanctioned by the US, which led to Kickstarter funds being inaccessible, but they have sorted it out and apparently did continue to work on the game in the meantime. This is a side-scrolling action RPG set in a post-apocalypse with a theme and setting inspired by Japan, having gorgeous pixel art and brutal combat, and does talk about non-linear levels, although I'm not sure if it would classify as a Metroidvania, and of the games on this list is the one most likely to be variable in quality given the circumstances, but fingers crossed it is great. One of the most gorgeous action roguelites in development is Yasha Legend of the Demon Blade, another title that draws inspiration from Japan, being set in a fantasy world during the Edo period. The action and animations look gorgeous, as are the elemental powers and effects, with the trailer teasing multiple playable characters, and it's an art style inspired by classic Japanese paintings. This video is brought to you by Exophobia, a sci-fi retro-inspired first-person shooter set on board a crashed human spaceship which is now infested with aliens. Fight your way through the many levels of the ship to find the human survivors and to uncover the backstory of the crew, all as you master an upgradable alien weapon and escape the ship. Interestingly, this has Metroidvania-inspired elements, so you are unlocking new abilities for your gun, which not only increases your combat ability, but also allows you to access new areas. There will, of course, be challenging and unique boss fights, as well as plenty of secrets, all set to a thumping electronic music soundtrack, and wrapped up beautifully with the throwback pixel art style. As such, it's a throwback title with a modern twist, so if interested, wishlist the game on Steam and buy it when it releases on July 23rd. Another gorgeous looking game of interest is The Axis Unseen, a first-person open-world RPG in which our hero wields a bow as his primary weapon. This is a self-styled heavy metal horror game in which you play as a hunter of monsters, having to stalk them by following their trail, and then to use stealth to get the jump on them, in a manner that looks similar to The Witcher. There's a central narrative of learning more about the other hunters who have come before you, as well as RPG elements like improving your hunting skills and even bow powers, and most impressively, comes to us from a solo developer who used to work at Bethesda, having Skyrim, Starfield and Fallout on his resume, so this should be good. There are quite a number of upcoming Metroidvanias of interest as well, one of which is Marko Beyond Brave, a pretty hand-drawn title set in a world inspired by Slavic mythology. Our hero has to fight back against entropy itself by battling monsters and minions, with a wonderful hand-drawn art style, an extensive interconnected world with hundreds of rooms, and some pretty impressive looking boss fights as well. Long-time watchers of the channel will be aware that I'm a huge fan of Heroes of Might and Magic, especially 3, and often lament the fact that the IP is with Ubisoft, who is not doing anything with the series, and naturally, indie developers to the rescue since there are quite a number of spiritual successors which are great, the next of which is Silence of the Siren. This is a sci-fi entry instead of fantasy, which is different, but has turn-based combat on a grid, overworld exploration and castle building, so all the elements are there and will be for fans of the series. In making this video, I realized that I've quite a number of sandbox titles here of giving you the freedom to mess around and to see what happens, and I cannot think of a better title to kick us off than Kingmakers, a game that answers the question, what happens if you take a gun to a sword fight? Yes, you have access to modern weapons, and your PUBG looking guy can use shotguns, grenades, sniper rifles, jeeps, tanks and more against medieval fighters on horseback, so it is about as one-sided as it can get, ramping up the power fantasy appeal of games like this. But I suppose a legion of medieval knights charging at you will still provide some sort of challenge. The physics destruction in this looks impressive and has a strategy element as well, since presumably you are commanding troops like in Dynasty Warriors or something, and there's a twist at the end of this trailer that opens up another more intriguing aspect, although we don't have a specific date for this just yet. This next title is near and dear to my heart, since Cat Quest 3 is from a developer out of my home country of Singapore, and is one of the most successful indie developers in a country where it is not easy being one, with this being the latest entry in the long-running series. This is an action-adventure title with real-time combat, so think of a 2D Zelda game, with this being pirate-themed as you sail the Caribbean, battling pirates and seeking out treasure. It is very adorable, and the open world sailing and exploration part is new to the series and looks to be another fantastic follow-up. One of the games that absolutely blew up in 2023 was Pizza Tower, a Wario Land style platformer about speed and momentum, of getting enough speed to bash through walls and enemies to essentially smack a button at the end of the level and having to run back in reverse back to the start, with the same concept being applied to ANTONBLAST. It has a little bit more attitude since the booze of our protagonist was stolen by Satan, so he swears to tear apart hell piece by piece in order to get it back. Looking pretty intense in terms of action and might be a late Game of the Year contender with a release in November. This game might not look like it, but Tiny Glade is one of the most wishlisted games on Steam, up there in the top 20 next to games like Monster Hunter Wilds, Light No Fire and Path of Exile 2, which is not what you would expect of a tiny, cozy game like this. It is an interactive toy that allows you to build medieval dioramas, constructing little towns and hamlets with a very satisfying sound design, which follows in the footsteps of Townscaper, and while it doesn't have objectives or points, there's something to the chill nature of this game that has given it a mass appeal. This next game comes to us from one of my favourite developers, Massive Damage, who made Halcyon 6, which had some Heroes of Might and Magic vibes, and then the pixel art roguelite RPG Star Renegades, so their next title, Fera, the Sundered Tribes, is of interest. This is, for all intents and purposes, indie Monster Hunter, since you need to battle gigantic monsters in an open world, with the aerial traversal and combat mechanics being key, and also has an expanded base building and tribe management system that is more than just a collection of NPCs. A game with a confirmed release date is Angerfoot, a Devolver Digital published title, so expect the quality to be there, being an all-action first-person shooter with the ability to kick enemies. From what I have seen of this game, this has some sick beats to go along with the action and just oozes style. It comes to us from developer Free Lives, who made Broforce and Terra Nil, so it is quite the variety in genres that they make, and somehow they are nailing every single one. A game with instant appeal is Squirrel with a Gun, where, you guessed it, you play as a squirrel with a gun, and not just a pistol, but even up to shotguns, which is pretty hilarious to see. This is about as universal an appeal as it can get when it comes to video games, since why wouldn't you want to play as a squirrel with a gun, and looks to be similar to Goat Simulator in concept. It's a weird, wacky, fun time where you have to fight off secret agent types for some reason, where I'm most interested in the structure of the game and how coherently it is all put together. Another game which received a release date confirmation recently, which I'm excited about, is Demonschool, a turn-based tactical RPG mixed with a time and personal management system, so think Final Fantasy Tactics meets Persona and you get some idea. you play as university students who are somehow able to access the world in between those of the human and demon worlds, having to battle big weirdos while balancing that with university life. The combat system here is unique, allowing you to set up combos based on the position of your character, since they're able to knock enemies back with an amazing art style that mixes hand-drawn portraits, pixel art sprites, and 3D polygonal environments and bosses. Now this next title I'm very excited about, and even while Crypt Custodian says that it's a charming Metroidvania, which I disagree with, there's definitely merit to the game, genre definition semantics aside. This is an action-adventure title that has that familiar 2D Zelda-style camera angle in which you play as a mischievous cat who has died and has now been sentenced to clean up the underworld as its janitor forever. Interestingly, you're able to jump, and there is platforming in this, which I guess is where the Metroidvania description comes from, being able to unlock new abilities that let you access new areas as well. The game looks fantastic, with developer Carl Thompson being underrated, since his other games like Sheeple and Islets are great, so give those a play if you have not. I'm also very happy to share the news of the early access release of Chef RPG, a pixel art live sim title in which you are running restaurants, being involved in gathering of ingredients, cooking food, serving customers, and decorating and optimizing restaurant layouts. Of course, this looks very Stardew Valley inspired, but it is doing its own thing with the focus on cooking, but of course has the expected elements like characters to get to know and even romance. Some of you might not know this, but the developer has a YouTube channel named Pixel Architect with videos that have an insane number of views, all about game design and pixel art, so check it out and subscribe if you're curious. Here's another game that will be out very soon in Bow Path of the Teal Lotus, a Metroidvania title that has Japanese inspiration about a fox celestial blossom descending from the heavens, having to fulfill an ancient prophecy. This game has been on my radar for quite a while since it looks gorgeous, having vibes of Hollow Knight and Ori, but doing their own thing visually. The demo during the most recent Steam Next Festival has been well received and is out in July, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Developer Lazy Bear Games made some of the best indie games, including Punch Club and Graveyard Keeper, so when they were listed as a co-developer on Bloomtown: A Different Story, of course it had my attention. This is a Stranger Things style turn-based JRPG with a life sim element set in a 1960s inspired Americana setting in which our heroine and her friends must find out what is going on after people start to go missing. You are battling demons that live in the hearts of the residents, even being able to capture these creatures like in Pokemon, or more accurately, Shin Megami Tensei, and has fantastic pixel art as well. This next title is one of the most hyped indie games of the year and has also recently received a release date confirmation, in which Streets of Rogue 2 is the follow-up to a roguelite from 2019, which was very popular, with the sequel improving the pixel art and, interestingly, kind of changing the structure. The original had a run-based structure, and when you die, you had to pick another character and to start in a new procedurally generated world, with this looking to be more of a sandbox GTA-style experience. The sheer variety of things you can do in this game is impressive, especially in how you deal with different situations, with 36 different characters to play as that are as varied as hacker, gorilla, and investment banker, and looks to be zany in that GTA Online kind of way.
Welcome to the land of Mojo.
I'm pretty sure that this next title will release in 2024 after being delayed out of 2023, with the plucky Squire looking like a gorgeous 2D Zelda-style action-adventure game with an awesome cartoony look. And then comes the twist that the character can leave the book and the game transforms into a 3D platformer instead. It looks absolutely adorable and perhaps has some Mario Odyssey vibes and is a potential Game of the Year contender as well. onto a deeply strategic title named Menace, a game that comes to us from the developer of Battle Brothers, so I fully expect this to be excellent given how great that game is. Instead of managing a medieval mercenary company, you are kind of doing the same thing but sci-fi, where you are leading a strike force against an alien threat. That involves commanding marines, mercenaries, and criminals, playing politics with the local planetary governments, and selecting which distress call to answer with your limited resources. This could have interesting strategic implications, since the destruction of an outpost on a planet might weaken its government and bring them to the table to negotiate as an example, so do you leave that outpost in the lurch? It looks super sick as well, and I'm sure will entertain XCOM fans for tens, if not hundreds of hours to come. On paper, this next release is a no-brainer since Core Keeper already has 25,000 Steam reviews after 2 years in early access, which is a very impressive number, easily translating to at least 2.5 million copies sold, with the 1.0 release in August being of note since it will also be out on console and might just launch the game into the stratosphere. This is, for lack of a better term, top-down Terraria, since it has mining, crafting, base building, combat and boss fights, and that is not a bad thing since it is beautifully executed here with a ton of stuff to do. The 1.0 release will bring about the conclusion of the main story arc of uncovering the mystery of the core, as well as a new endgame biome, more bosses, enemies, equipment, pets and more. And if I were a betting man, I would put a lot of money on post 1.0 support for the game, since it is huge and deserves it, so maybe we will see a Terraria kind of longevity here as well. Another game with quite the pedigree is Blade Chimera, coming to us from Japanese developer Team Ladybug of Toho Lunar Nights and Delit in Wonder Labyrinth fame, so of course their next Metroidvania is one of interest. The setting and theme is pretty interesting since it is occult-inspired cyberpunk, whatever that means, as you explore dark Osaka and battle demons. As such, there's still a Japanese core to its inspiration, which is interesting to see in the context of this version of Osaka with the ghost sword lady and the mix of swords, guns and spells being intriguing, not to mention awe-inspiring bosses as well.
In a world where the top special forces operatives are all just wizards for some reason, one team is unstoppable. Not yours. Hers.
I most recently talked about Tactical Breach Wizards during the most recent Steam Next Festival, and if the opening seconds of this trailer are anything to go by, the writing and humor will be the highlight, in addition to strategic tactical combat, so head on over to the Steam page to watch this in full. This comes to us from Tom Francis and Suspicious Developments, makers of Gunpoint and Heat Signature, with a running motif in their games being the ability to throw enemies through glass windows, and it returns here. It is pretty much a lock for the Game of the Year list, although I guess we'll have to see how much content there is here. Of course, the next game from the developer of Dead Cells is of note, and we did get an extended look at the gameplay of Windblown recently, which you might not have seen. This has a fascinating setting of floating islands and villages orbiting a deadly vortex in which the peace of your little village is about to be disrupted by sentinels from the void. You play as a leaper, a powerful warrior with speed that has to take down these creatures, although more often than not, they will meet their grisly fate in combat. However, you can absorb the memories of fallen leapers to unlock special abilities, eventually resulting in overpowered synergies, and with 2 weapons that you can hold, trinkets, gifts, and even fish, this looks to be the next great roguelite hit. Surprise, this might be cheating since this title is not just one game but 50, in a manner similar to those 30-in-1 cartridges from days of yore, in which UFO 50 was announced back in 2017, so it has been 7 years and counting for this game. based on impressions around Summer Game Fest, it appears as though each of the 50 titles is a fully fledged game in itself and not just a mini-game collection, with genres being as diverse as golf, a turn-based JRPG, strategy titles, action-adventure games, Metroidvanias, and so much more, even having a meta-narrative continuity behind the 50 titles which were made by a fictional video game company in the 1980s. This is headed up by the developer of Spelunky, but also creators of Downwell and Catacomb Kids are involved, forming an indie super team, so this should be excellent. Watch this video for the best games of the year 2023.